The Silent Enforcer. Chapter 1. The Warning. The diner was the kind of place where truckers passed through and never stayed. Its neon sign flickered in the dim light of early morning, a flash of red and blue against the dark sky. Jake Draven sat alone in a booth by the window, his gaze on the empty highway. He wasn't a man who stayed anywhere for long, and that suited him fine. After years in the military, Draven had learned that attachments only slowed you down. But today, something felt different. The waitress approached with a nervous smile, setting down a cup of black coffee in front of him. "Anything else, honey?" she asked, trying to make small talk. He shook his head, eyes still fixed on the road. Across the diner, the TV flickered to life, broadcasting a news report. A local businesswoman had gone missing, a high-profile case that was causing a stir in the nearby town of Sandport. The woman's face flashed across the screen, smiling, unaware of the danger that had taken her. Draven's attention flickered momentarily to the screen, but he dismissed it. Not his problem. As he sipped his coffee, the door to the diner swung open with a force that sent a gust of cold wine through the room. Two men walked in, dressed in suits that didn't fit the rural setting. Their eyes scanned the room, settling on Draven with an intensity that made the air crackle with tension. He noticed their stance immediately, the way they moved with a purpose that wasn't casual. Chapter 2. The Past Never Sleeps. The drive to Sandport felt longer than Draven remembered, the miles stretching out endlessly under the gray sky. Memories crept up on him like shadows, tugging at the edges of his mind. 5 years. It had been 5 years since he'd left that town behind, along with all the chaos that had come with it. He had sworn never to go back, but now, someone had forced his hand. As he approached the town, the road narrowed, trees lining the sides like sentinels watching his every move. Sandport was quiet, too quiet. The kind of quiet that told Draven something wasn't right. The streets were empty, the storefronts shut tight, as if the town itself had retreated into hiding. It wasn't the Sandport he remembered, bustling with activity. Something had changed. He pulled into a gas station on the outskirts, the pump creaking as he filled his tank. An old man sat behind the counter inside, his eyes following Draven through the dusty window. Draven pushed open the door, the bell above it jingling softly. The old man didn't speak, just watched him with wary eyes. "Where is everyone?" Draven asked, glancing around the empty lot. The old man didn't answer at first, just gave him a long look. "Trouble's been hanging over this place for a while now," he finally said, his voice gravelly. "Folks keep to themselves these days. Too many things going wrong." Draven nodded, taking in the information. "Anyone new around here recently?" "Strangers." The old man shrugged. "Few people come through now and then, but not many stay. Had a couple of city boys asking questions a few days ago. Didn't like the look of M." That confirmed Draven's suspicions. The men in the diner were part of something bigger, and they weren't the first to come sniffing around. He leaned closer, lowering his voice. "I'm looking for someone. Someone important." The old man's eyes narrowed. "You're not the first one to say that." Before Draven could ask more, the bell above the door jingled again. A woman walked in, tall, mid-30s, with sharp features and a confidence that made Draven immediately take notice. She glanced at him, then at the old man, her gaze hardening slightly. "You Jake Draven?" she asked, her tone direct. Draven raised an eyebrow. "Depends. Who's asking?" She didn't smile. "Name's Liz Fowler. I'm the sheriff here. And if you're looking for answers, you're not gonna like what you find." Draven stayed silent, reading her. She wasn't lying, but she was holding something back. "What's going on here?" he asked, cutting to the point. Liz glanced at the old man, then back to Draven. "I know why you're here. It's about her, isn't it?" Her? Draven's mind raced. There was only one person she could mean. someone he hadn't thought about in years, someone he had believed was long gone. But how could that be? Liz seemed to read his confusion. She's not dead, Draven. And if you don't do something fast, she will be. For the first time in years, a knot of uncertainty formed in Draven's gut. The past he had tried to outrun was catching up to him. And this time, it wasn't just about his own survival. It was about someone he thought he had lost forever. Want to know what happens next? Subscribe and share to follow this story full of twists and turns. Chapter 3. Unseen Forces. The sheriff's office was a small, unimpressive building on the edge of town, a leftover from a time when Sandport was busier and safer. Draven sat across from Sheriff Liz Fowler, her desk cluttered with papers and case files. The room was dim, a single lamp casting shadows across the walls. She leaned forward, hands clasped, watching him with the eyes of someone who'd seen too much. She was taken 3 days ago, Liz began, her voice steady but tight. Vanished without a trace. No ransom, no contact. Just gone. Draven's mind raced. He hadn't expected this. He thought she was dead, a part of his past he had locked away forever. Now, she was alive, and in danger. Where was she last seen? He asked, his voice gruff. Her name's Emily Cross, Liz said, sliding a file across the desk. She'd been living quietly in Sandport for the last few years, trying to stay under the radar. She was careful, kept to herself. But someone found her. And now, she's missing. Draven opened the file, his eyes falling on a photo of Emily. She looked older, but it was undeniably her. The same dark hair, the same eyes that had haunted him for years. He had believed she was gone, had blamed himself for it. But now, the guilt returned with a vengeance. Who took her? Draven asked, his voice low. Liz sighed, leaning back in her chair. I don't know, but I have my suspicions. We've had strangers coming through town recently. People who don't belong here. I think it's all connected. Draven's jaw tightened. You think the men who approached me are involved? Could be, Liz said. But they're not the only ones. There's something bigger going on here, Draven. And I don't have the manpower to deal with it. Draven stared at the photo again, the weight of the past pressing down on him. He had left this life behind for a reason, but now, it was pulling him back in. Emily needed him. He couldn't turn his back on that. Why didn't you tell me she was alive? He asked, his voice harsh. Liz didn't flinch. Because I didn't know if you'd care. You left Sandport. You left her. Draven clenched his fists. She was right. He had left. But not by choice. He had been forced out, driven away by enemies he couldn't defeat. And now, those same enemies had come for Emily. I need to know everything, Draven said, his voice cold and determined. Who's involved? Where they might have taken her. Liz nodded. There's a warehouse on the outskirts of town. Old, abandoned. We've had reports of activity there recently, but I haven't had the chance to check it out. If they're holding her anywhere, it could be there. Draven stood, grabbing his jacket. I'm going there. Now. Liz stood too, grabbing her keys. I'm coming with you. Draven shook his head. This isn't your fight, Sheriff. It's mine. Liz met his gaze, unflinching. She's my responsibility too. And if you think I'm letting you go in there alone, you're wrong. Draven hesitated. He wasn't used to working with anyone, especially not law enforcement. But Liz wasn't giving him a choice. And right now, he needed all the help he could get. Fine, he said, heading for the door. But if things go sideways, you stay out of my way. The drive to the warehouse was tense, the sun sinking low on the horizon as darkness crept across the landscape. Draven kept his eyes on the road, his mind focused on the mission. Emily was alive. That was all that mattered. He would tear the town apart to find her if he had to. As they approached the warehouse, Liz cut the headlights and parked a distance away. The building loomed ahead, a hulking shadow against the night sky. There were no lights, no signs of movement. But Draven knew better. Something was waiting inside. "Are you sure about this?" Liz asked, her hand on the door handle. Draven nodded, checking the grip on his weapon. "I'm sure." They moved silently toward the warehouse, the crunch of gravel under their boots the only sound in the still night. Draven's senses were on high alert, every nerve buzzing with the tension of what was to come. As they reached the entrance, he motioned for Liz to stay back. He wasn't sure what they'd find inside, but he was ready for anything. With a swift motion, Draven kicked the door open, his gun drawn. The darkness inside swallowed them whole, the silence thick and oppressive. And then, a voice echoed from the shadows. "I've been expecting you, Draven." Chapter 4. Into the Lion's Den. The voice cut through the darkness like a blade, cold and sharp. Draven's grip on his gun tightened as he scanned the room, his eyes adjusting to the dim light. He couldn't see anyone, but he could feel their presence, a predator waiting for him to make a move. "Show yourself," Draven growled, stepping forward cautiously, keeping Liz behind him. His instincts were firing on all cylinders, every muscle in his body coiled, ready for action. From the shadows, a figure emerged, tall, thin, and dressed in a black coat that blended into the night. The man's face was obscured by the low light, but his voice was unmistakable, calm, controlled, like someone used to being in charge. "You've come a long way, Draven," the man said, his tone almost mocking. "I wasn't sure you'd take the bait. But here you are." Draven didn't lower his weapon. "Where is she?" The man stepped closer, just enough for Draven to catch a glimpse of a cruel smile. "Emily is safe, for now. But that depends on you." Liz moved slightly behind Draven, her hand on her own weapon. Draven gave her a slight shake of his head, a silent command to stay back. He didn't trust this guy, not for a second, but charging in without a plan would get them both killed, and it wouldn't save Emily. "You know who I am," Draven said, his voice hard. "You know what I'm capable of. So let's skip the games. Tell me what you want." The man chuckled, a sound that grated on Draven's nerves. "Oh, I know exactly who you are. That's why you're here. See, you left some unfinished business in Sandport. Business that I've been cleaning up ever since you ran off." Draven's mind raced. Unfinished business? He had left this town years ago, thinking he had put it all behind him. But clearly, someone had been picking up the pieces. And now, they were using Emily as leverage. "You want revenge?" Draven said, piecing it together. "You think I owe you something?" The man tilted his head, as if amused by Draven's deduction. "It's not about what you owe me. It's about setting things right. You left a mess, Draven. A mess that nearly cost me everything. And now, it's time for you to pay your debt." Draven's eyes narrowed. "You want me dead?" The man shrugged, his smile never faltering. "Not dead, exactly. But close enough. You see, I need you to take care of something for me. Something you're very good at." Draven's grip on his gun tightened. This was turning into a trap, one he wasn't sure how to get out of. "What's the job?" The man's smile widened. "There's someone in town. A man who's been making my life difficult. I want you to remove him. Permanently. Do that, and I'll let Emily go." Draven felt a cold anger rise in his chest. He was being blackmailed, manipulated into doing someone else's dirty work. But if this was the only way to save Emily, he didn't have a choice. "Who's the target?" Draven asked, his voice low. The man stepped forward, his face now fully visible in the pale light. He was older than Draven had expected, with sharp features and eyes that gleamed with cruelty. "The mayor of Sandport. He's the one standing in my way. Get rid of him, and Emily walks free." Draven clenched his jaw. Taking out a target like that wasn't his style anymore, but this wasn't about him. It was about Emily. He had failed her once before, and he wasn't about to do it again. "I'll do it," Draven said, his voice tight with controlled fury. "But if you double-cross me, if anything happens to her, I'll kill you." The man smiled, clearly enjoying the power he held over Draven. "I wouldn't dream of crossing you. Once the mayor is out of the picture, Emily will be yours." Without another word, the man melted back into the shadows, leaving Draven and Liz alone in the warehouse, the weight of his words hanging in the air like a noose. Liz stepped forward, her face set in a grim expression. "You're not seriously considering this, are you? Taking out the mayor?" Draven holstered his gun, his mind racing with the possibilities. "I don't have a choice. If I don't do this, Emily dies." Liz shook her head. "There has to be another way. We can't just play into his hands." Draven knew she was right, but he also knew that time was running out. "I'll find another way. But right now, we need to figure out who this guy is, and what his real plan is." Liz nodded, determination hardening her features. "I'll dig into the mayor's office, see if I can find any connections. But you need to be careful, Draven. Whoever this guy is, he's got Sandport in a stranglehold." Draven glanced at the darkened warehouse one last time before heading for the door. He won't have it for much longer. Curious to know what's coming next? Subscribe and share so you don't miss the next chapter full of action and suspense. Chapter 5. Bait and Trap. The next day, Sandport felt different, uneasy, like the calm before a storm. Draven stood near the town square, watching the people move about their daily routines, oblivious to the darkness lurking beneath the surface. He knew the man in black, whoever he was, had the town under his thumb. And now, Draven was being forced into a game he wanted no part of. The mayor's office was located in the center of town, a modest building that looked unassuming from the outside. But Draven knew better. This was no ordinary mayor. Whoever he was, he'd made powerful enemies. And now, Draven was being used as the weapon to remove him. Liz had insisted on helping, though Draven still wasn't sure how far he could trust her. They stood across the street from the mayor's office, hidden behind an old newspaper stand. Liz was tense, scanning the area for any sign of trouble. "This is insane," she muttered under her breath. "We can't just walk in there and take him out. There has to be another way." Draven kept his eyes on the building. "There's always another way. But right now, I don't see it. Whoever's pulling the strings has Emily, and I'm not going to let her die because I hesitated." Liz shot him a glance, her brow furrowed in frustration. "You really think this guy's going to let her go if you kill the mayor? People like him don't just walk away. They want control, and they'll never stop." Draven knew she was right. The man in black didn't seem like the type to honor any deal. But if there was even a chance he could save Emily, he had to take it. "Then we don't give him control," Draven said, his voice low. "We use this to flush him out." Liz raised an eyebrow. "And how do you plan to do that?" Draven's eyes narrowed as he studied the building. "We make him think we're playing his game. But we'll be ready for him." Before Liz could respond, Draven stepped out from behind the stand and crossed the street. He could feel Liz's hesitation behind him, but she followed, her hand resting near her holster. Together, they approached the mayor's office, the sun casting long shadows across the pavement. The front door was unlocked. Draven pushed it open and stepped inside, the smell of old wood and dust filling the air. The building was quiet, eerily so. No receptionist, no staff. Just a long, empty hallway leading to the mayor's office. They moved cautiously, the sound of their footsteps muffled by the carpet. Draven's senses were on high alert, every nerve in his body telling him something was off. This was too easy. Too quiet. They reached the mayor's office door. Draven glanced at Liz, who nodded. He twisted the knob and pushed the door open. Inside, the mayor sat at his desk, an older man with graying hair and a weary look in his eyes. He didn't flinch as they entered, his gaze calm and resigned, as if he had been expecting them. "Mr. Draven," the mayor said, his voice gravelly. "I was wondering when you'd show up." Draven didn't lower his guard. "You know who I am." The mayor nodded slowly. "I know a lot of things. I know why you're here. And I know what's really going on in this town." Liz stepped forward, her hand still on her weapon. "You know about the man in black? The one controlling everything." The mayor's eyes darkened. "He's been a plague on this town for years. A ghost that haunts us all. But if you're here, it means he's getting desperate. He's running out of time." Draven's jaw tightened. "He wants you dead." The mayor gave a bitter smile. "Of course he does. I've been the last thing standing between him and complete control. But I'm not afraid to die, Mr. Draven. I've been prepared for this for a long time." Draven glanced at Liz, who looked just as confused as he felt. "Then why hasn't he just killed you already?" The mayor leaned back in his chair, his expression grim. "Because he needs me alive. I have something he wants. Something he's been searching for." Draven's eyes narrowed. "What?" The mayor hesitated, then reached into his desk drawer, pulling out a small, worn leather journal. He placed it on the desk in front of Draven. "This," the mayor said. "This is what he's been after. It's the key to everything." Draven picked up the journal, flipping through its pages. It was filled with notes, maps, and coded messages, an intricate web of information that Draven didn't fully understand. But he knew one thing: this journal held the answers they needed. The mayor stood, his hands trembling slightly. "You have to get this out of Sandport. If he gets his hands on it, there will be nothing left to stop him." Liz stepped forward. "We're not leaving without Emily." The mayor's expression softened. "She's the leverage he's using against you, isn't she? I'm sorry, but if you want to save her, you'll need to do more than just hand over the journal. You'll have to confront him. End this, once and for all." Draven felt the weight of the journal in his hand, the weight of the choice he now had to make. The man in black had set the trap, but Draven was going to turn it on him. He just had to make sure Emily survived. He turned to Liz. "Get the journal to safety. I'm going after him." Liz's eyes widened. "You can't take him on alone." Draven's face hardened. "I won't be alone. Not this time." The mayor nodded solemnly. "Godspeed, Mr. Draven. You'll need it." Draven tucked the journal into his jacket, his mind already racing with the plan forming in his head. The man in black thought he had the upper hand. But this time, Draven was ready. And when it was over, Sandport would be free. Chapter 6. Showdown. The sun had disappeared beneath the horizon, casting Sandport into darkness. Draven moved silently through the outskirts of town, the wind howling through the empty streets. His mind was focused, his heart steady. Every step brought him closer to the confrontation he had been preparing for, the one that would decide everything: Emily's fate, his own, and the future of this town. He had sent Liz away with the journal, trusting her to get it out of Sandport safely. But now, it was just him, the man in black, and the long-buried ghosts of his past. Draven knew the man wouldn't run, he would be waiting. And Draven wasn't going to give him the satisfaction of hesitation. The old warehouse loomed ahead, the same one where Draven had first encountered the man in black. Only this time, the building wasn't quiet. A single light glowed from inside, casting long, eerie shadows across the ground. Draven could feel the tension building in the air, like the static before a storm. With one last breath, he approached the door and pushed it open. The room inside was vast and empty, save for one figure standing in the center. The man in black. He turned slowly as Draven entered, his expression cold, calculated, like a chess master who had already won the game before his opponent even sat down. "Draven," the man said, his voice echoing off the walls. "I knew you'd come." Draven didn't respond. He kept his eyes locked on the man, every muscle in his body ready to spring into action. He wasn't here for words, he was here to end this. "You've been a thorn in my side for a long time," the man continued, taking slow, measured steps toward Draven. "But now, it's over. You're out of moves." Draven's jaw tightened. "Where's Emily?" The man smiled, a cold, cruel smile. "She's here. Safe, for now. But that depends on you. Have you brought what I asked for?" Draven's hand rested on his jacket, where the journal should have been. But instead of pulling it out, he stepped forward, closing the distance between them. "The journal's gone. You're not getting it." The man's smile faltered for a split second, but his confidence quickly returned. "You think that changes anything? Without Emily, you have nothing." Draven's eyes narrowed. "You made a mistake. You thought you could control me, use her as leverage. But you don't know me." The man's face twisted into a sneer. "I know you better than you think. I know you're nothing but a broken man, clinging to a past you can't fix. You ran away once before, and now you're back, pretending you're some kind of hero." Draven's pulse quickened, but he kept his voice steady. "I'm not pretending." With a sudden, fluid motion, Draven lunged forward, closing the gap between them. The man reached for his gun, but Draven was faster, knocking it out of his hand with a swift strike. The man stumbled back, his expression twisting from confidence to shock as Draven pinned him against the wall. "You made one big mistake," Draven growled, his grip tightening around the man's collar. "You underestimated how far I'd go to protect her." The man struggled, his hands clawing at Draven's arm, but Draven didn't relent. He could feel the rage boiling beneath the surface, the years of guilt and pain finally coming to a head. But he couldn't let it consume him, not yet. "Where is she?" Draven demanded, his voice dangerously low. The man's eyes flickered with fear, but he managed a defiant smile. "It doesn't matter. You'll never find her in time." Draven's grip tightened, his voice a growl. "I'm done playing your game. Tell me where she is, or you won't live to see the next minute." For the first time, the man's confidence wavered. He could see in Draven's eyes that he meant every word. Finally, with a gasp, he nodded toward a door at the far end of the room. "She's there," he wheezed. "But it's too late." "You're too late." Draven threw the man to the ground and rushed toward the door, his heart pounding in his chest. He kicked it open, revealing a small, dimly lit room. And there, bound to a chair, was Emily. Her eyes widened as she saw him, tears streaming down her face. "Jake!" Draven quickly cut her bindings, his hands trembling slightly as he pulled her to her feet. "I've got you. You're safe now." Emily clung to him, her body weak from exhaustion. "He said he'd kill you. He said I'd never see you again." Draven held her tightly, his mind already racing with what needed to happen next. "He won't hurt you again. I promise." As they stepped back into the main room, Draven saw that the man in black was gone, disappeared into the night like a shadow. But it didn't matter. He had Emily, and the journal was safe. For now, the game was over. But Draven knew one thing: as long as men like the one in black existed, the fight was never truly done. The end. If you enjoyed our story, subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications.